All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start talking at you this morning. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. As always, I see a lot of our repeat listeners on this list, and you guys have been hanging with us for over a year now, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. I do hope that you will share some feedback. Of course, we'll always take questions, but we also always would love to hear what's happening. You guys are the boots on the ground out there, and we'd like to know what, since the changes in the mask requirement may have changed in your locality, what you have, if you've already taken action, and what your current policy is, or maybe you're tuning in today to figure out what that should be. We're always interested in hearing anecdotal evidence of what's going on out there in your particular workplace. So as always, please use the Q&A feature as opposed to the chat. And that way we can record your questions and comments after the fact. And with me today is my friend Kim Alexander. Hi, Kim.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks, and thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I would, if I could have you every time, I would. As you guys probably know, since many of you are repeat listeners, Kim is a human resources advisor for a company formerly named Mammoth, ThinkHR, but as of yesterday, it is now rebranded to Mineral. So that's exciting.
Yes, very exciting.
And what's even more exciting is that I remembered to update that on this slide. In fact, I think my friend Olivia did that, remembered for me. So thank you, Olivia. So Kim is going to join us today to talk about masks in the workplace and anything related to masks. If you have a vaccine question, throw it our way. That's always something that we love talking about. Any sort of COVID-19 related issue, throw it our way. We'll see if we can't answer it today here on the broadcast. A couple of quick housekeeping items. We will record this webinar and post the audio recording and the slides on our website at dominionpayroll.com by the end of the day today. You just need to go to click on the COVID-19 resource link at the top. Like I said earlier, we're going to submit questions via the Q&A function and not the chat, which allows me to retain these questions after the fact, so I can make sure we have a record. Or if you don't want to discuss in this format, you can always submit questions or comments to questions@dominionpayroll.com, and we will triage those as they come in. So those are our housekeeping reminders today, and you can submit questions today in Q&A at any point during the webinar, and we may or may not answer them in real time, or we might wait till the end. Typically, we try to answer them as they come in if they're relevant to what we're talking about. Okay. So without further ado, since we last were on the air with HR Matters, things have changed. The CDC came out with guidance around vaccinated people, and now they don't have to wear masks in the workplace, indoors, with the exception of some specific industries, as well as public transportation. And then if you're unvaccinated, you're supposed to continue to wear a face covering. Right after that announcement, states like Virginia, where I am, and Maryland lifted their mask mandates. Some states had already lifted them. Some states have banned them. Some states still have them in place. So we realize that it's still a locality specific issue for many of you. But even if you're under a mandate still, you can, plan ahead, because at some point you're going to have to adapt to whatever the guidance and the mandate or lack thereof is. So this is where we are. It's an exciting time. It's a weird time. It's a kind of a murky time, because now we are in this situation where we have populations of employees in our workplace. Some may be vaccinated, some may not be. What are your rights and responsibilities as an employer? What can you ask? What can't you ask to sort of stay compliant as well, but also in service to your duty as an employer to keep everybody safe from known hazards. And the COVID-19 virus is definitely a known hazard. Kim, what do you think about this sort of phase that we're in with?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting because, if we look at where we were last year at this time, we couldn't wait to get here. Right now, here we are, we're getting more and more folks vaccinated every day. And I don't know, from an HR perspective, I kind of thought the questions would end. And that is not the case. We continue to have more questions. There continues to be some murkiness as to, what to do. Continuing to rely on the CDC for guidance in these matters. So I gave that some thought yesterday. I'm like, I thought getting vaccinated, we would reduce questions, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's job security for us, right?
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is.
Questions. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, we're at the nexus of a lot of different things. Some people have very strong opinions about vaccines, and we're not going to, in this format today, go into sort of the epidemiology behind it or the ethics or the theories or what have you, because that's not our job. Our job is to make sure you guys know what the guidance is or is not, and what your responsibilities are as an employer and what to avoid doing so that you guys don't get into any sort of trouble.
Right. And Lesley, I think you brought up a really good point. Now, as in last year at this time, it remains the responsibility of the employers to provide a safe workplace. Mm-hmm. So, doing so in the most effective way that is in compliance is really, what you as an employer should focus upon.
Right, exactly. And Angela has a question here. What about natural immunity, such as with other viruses like chickenpox? Getting a vaccine isn't important after you've had a confirmed case. Why is this virus any different? Angela, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to hazard to guess that. I have my personal opinions, but I'm not here to offer those. But it is a great question. This is just a new realm for us. I mean, there are certainly sectors of our society where we expect to be asked about vaccinations. For instance, when you enroll a child in school, and then of course the flu shot might be a requirement for some folks, and other types of inoculations depending on what field they're in. But this is a different story. Most of us, if we were vaccinated as children, we really haven't had to do much else except get a flu shot every year if we want to. And even then, you can still get the flu. This is a different story. We're talking about widespread vaccination of adults and a virus that is dangerous in a lot of ways, and it's worldwide. So, Angela, I appreciate your question. I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring you, but I don't have the answer to that. So one day maybe I'll have an epidemiologist on here to answer all of our questions. But unfortunately, Kim and I do not have an MD after our name. So
that might be a great question for the CDC or your local health department.
Yep, exactly. Okay. I do have a couple questions already, but I'm going to go ahead and dive in for a second, and then I'll get to these questions in just a minute. Okay, so here in Virginia, there is a website out there that lists all of the states and what their current mandates are or lack thereof. In Virginia, this is what it says, and you'll find this type of language a lot here in the second bullet, or first and second bullet. Individuals age 5 and older should wear a mask in accordance with CDC guidance for mask use and fully vaccinated individuals. So what they're saying there is, we are now recommending that you follow CDC guidelines for mask use and fully vaccinated individuals. It doesn't say explicitly in the Virginia executive order that unvaccinated people or vaccinated people don't need to wear masks. They're deferring to the CDC. So you kind of have to look at your individual state's language around this. But if they say in accordance with CDC guidance, that does mean that vaccinated people don't have to wear masks. However, it is up to employers to still come up with a policy, and you still can require masks if you want to. Anything to add there, Kim? Oh, did we lose Kim? Are you still with
No,
us?
I was muted, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We'll learn this
So
technology eventually.
but yeah, the key takeaway there is that yes, follow CDC guidance, but you as employers also have the right to put in place regulations or policies that you want to. So if you as an employer want to require employees to wear masks, all employees, you can do so. We would recommend that you have a legitimate business reason for wanting to do that. And of course, you would want to share that with your employees as to why you are continuing the mask mandate.
Right. And back to Angela's question, and now we have another one in the Q&A here about the immunity and how long it lasts after the vaccination. This is, as with everything with this pandemic, consider this a phase and not, and we can't guarantee anything going forward. It could be that the scientists come out and say, or the vaccine manufacturers and the epidemiologists come out and say, everyone needs a booster. If they got vaccinated in the spring of 2021, they're going to need a booster shot in 6 months. And then we go from there, and we'll of course monitor that and let you guys know our thoughts on how that could affect your workplace and your policy. But we just don't know. And what I think what we need to be careful of, and this is, of course, you guys know that I'm fairly cautious, is, we as individuals, and myself included, once you take that mask off, it feels so great to not have to worry about it. But don't throw them away or burn them in a big pile yet, because we just don't know what's going to be the next sort of guidance around this public health crisis.
And I think, and I might be wrong because I'm not a doctor, but I think this is one of the first vaccines that we're just continuing to study it as we get further down the path. So we're learning new things every day, hence the reason for the changes. The longer that we go, where folks have the length of time and folks have been vaccinated, the more information we're going to have. And so it's absolutely fair to say, we might need a booster in 6 months. We might need a booster every year moving forward. And, the longer that the more than time goes by, we're going to have more information.
Right. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, think how much information we've all processed and had to learn and disseminate in the last 13 months. It's crazy, 14 months now. That said, every morning in my glamorous HR lifestyle, I check a couple agency websites. I refresh them to see what the new guidance is, if any. As of an hour ago, Osha still has not put out anything more specific. This is what they have on their website. And Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know anything more recent than this, but this is what I found this morning. It's been the same since the CDC changed its guidance 10 or 12 days ago.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. They're deferring to the CDC for right now.
Okay, and then meanwhile at the EEOC, our friends at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they haven't updated their guidance since December, which, believe me, I would like them to. But anyway, they do have great guidance out there, very specific, and we're going to touch on that, and we have touched on that before. But right now, this is their message on their website. So I can only imagine that there are a bunch of agency staffers up there in the Beltway that are really trying to examine what they should be saying as an agency. I still haven't seen, the DOL hasn't updated its Q&A or its FAQs. So there's still some great areas. So today we're gonna do the best we can with what we know and give you guys some practical advice and answer your questions. Okay, so the way that I see it, and Kim and I talked about this a little bit beforehand, is you guys have roughly 4 options. And again, I am open to creative alternatives and or a fifth or sixth option if that's what works for your workplace, and we'll sort of vet that and see if that sounds right to us. But the options that I see for most industries are you can require the vaccination, sort of just say, you know what, given this, we don't really want to have to deal with masks or no masks, which populations get to go mask free, which don't, what, you know, are we going to have to police this? You can go sort of the full on option of saying, you know what, everyone just needs to get a vaccine. We'll give you time off to get it. We'll, you know, we'll give you 60 or 90 days to get it. In that time, everyone needs to wear a mask. That's one option. The second option from there to me is sort of the next step sort of down would be active enforcement. And then the third one would be incentivized enforcement. And then you've got the honor system. So what do these mean in practice? So if you require a vaccination, you would actually, the vaccine would be a condition of employment. You would request proof or require proof actually rather, and document that. There are some risks to this approach. Most people aren't taking this approach, but if you are, you need to understand that any vaccine related illness or injury may be subject to a workers' compensation claim. And there are tax credits in place to give employees time out to get the vaccine and to recover from it if need be, and you'll get reimbursed for that time. So you can pay them for that time, and then you'll get paid for that time as well. So I only have one client that's requiring a vaccination right now, and they are in the healthcare field, and they decided to do a full sale company-wide policy as opposed to sort of partitioning it between frontline healthcare workers and more office-based administrative staff. And I see there is a question in here about, or maybe I imagined it, maybe it's in the chat, about if there are some people, could you have some part of your workforce be required to wear masks based on what their responsibilities are and their exposure to other populations, or if there are specific places in your building where you should, that are like possibly small and not very well ventilated. Could you prohibit unvaccinated employees from using that area? You know, all that is, you know, if you required a vaccination full sale, you wouldn't have to deal with that. But again, there are some risks to that. Anything, and we will address those questions in just a second.
Sure. I'll just add to that. I think you absolutely can treat different groups of employees differently as long as it's for a legitimate business reason. So if you've got folks who are dealing directly with the public and you're going to require them to have a vaccine, that's fine. What you need to just consider is the impact on employee morale when you are requiring one group to get a vaccine and then others, you know, consider, for example, if part of those others was management not requiring them to get a vaccine, that could have an impact on morale. So, you know, just really think and consider the ramifications of the approach with just requiring that of, you know, certain groups of employees. And then always remember too, that if you have someone who may have an illness or disability that is preventing them from getting a vaccine, that you would want to accommodate them. That's where the ADA interactive process would come into play.
Right, exactly. That's a good point. And we can talk more about the ADA in just a second. Okay. So the active enforcement approach, which by the way is a term I borrowed from somebody else, so I can't take full credit for it. But this to me would mean that you're actively asking vaccinate. You're not mandating the vaccine. It's not a condition of employment, but you want to know what the numbers are. You want to know who is vaccinated and who is not. And you're taking it very seriously. And you're saying, if you choose to wear a mask, if you choose not to wear a mask, then you need to provide proof of that you're fully vaccinated. Some people are still testing folks who want to go maskless. as opposed to asking for documentation. But then I would think the easiest way would just be to say, just present proof of your vaccination. We'll record it. There you go. Now, there again, you might have a population of people who have bona fide exemptions for medical or religious objections to getting the vaccine, and you really need to stick to yes or no questions here. Not if they say no, I haven't gotten it, you can't ask them why unless they formally want to volunteer that they have a bona fide disability or religious exemption. So the important thing to remember is stick to yes or no. You can ask, the EEOC says you can ask. It's not a medical procedure. So you can ask if they have had the vaccine or not. You just can't ask why. Anything to add to that, Kim?
No, I think that was very concise and to the point.
Yeah, so there are definitely fields that might want to take this approach. Again, because you're trying to ensure the safety of your employees and perhaps your customers. There are certain ways that you can go about it that will make it feel a bit more like back to that morale point that Kim raised, to make sure that you really just need to demonstrate and lay out and be transparent about the business reasons. You're not making a political statement. You're not discriminating against people who don't get vaccinations. You just have decided, leadership has decided that based on the nature of your business, it is in your best interest to go this route.
Right. And Lesley, I would just add that I think this is probably the approach that I think it's safe to say that most employers are taking. And just remember that as an employer, you want to continue to educate your employees as to why they should get the vaccine. Don't forget that. I mean, I think we're at a point now where we feel like everybody knows everything, but continue to educate your employees as to the benefits of getting the vaccine.
Yeah, and remove barriers to getting it. Like I said,
yeah, absolutely.
There are programs in place to support you if you'd like to provide paid time off for folks to go get it, and also recover from it if they need to. Okay, so the next sort of level of options here is what I call incentivized enforcement. And I want to say Walmart is doing this. So they're not requiring people to show proof, but they're offering them $75 cash if they do produce that card. I've also heard of employers testing people who aren't vaccinated every morning, and that some employees are like, well, that's annoying. I'm just going to go get the vaccine. Some people are still waiting to sort of see how other people react to the vaccine. So again, with this approach, you want to take measures to prevent seeming like you're discriminating or penalizing or politicizing the discussion. It's business. It's a business decision. Make sure they know the right channels to share that proof of vaccination. Do they share it with their hiring manager or their direct supervisor? Do they share it with their HR department if they have one? Yes, you can keep a copy of their vaccination card in their file. We have a question in the queue here that asked that. You absolutely can keep it. And I would keep that even after they leave. I would keep that in their file, keep it separate. You should always keep medical information separate from the rest of the file, just so that people who go in there looking for perhaps a performance review or something like that doesn't stumble across medical information. And then that's that document piece there. So you could either keep a copy of the card on file or simply just have them say yes or no, take their word for it, and record that somehow. If you're one of our clients, you could do it in iSolved. If not, you could have a spreadsheet. But if you're going this route and incentivizing people, then I would think I'd want to see proof, because the next option is the honor system. This is when you're truly relying on people who are walking around without masks to truthfully be vaccinated without asking them to prove it. So this one's a little murky. It's great in that you don't have to be the vaccine police, but on the other hand, And I don't mean to sound cynical about my fellow human beings, but sometimes people aren't honest. So I guess this really depends on your situation, your type of industry, your environment, your surroundings, your people, your culture. And then in this case, you wouldn't document. If someone produces their card and says, I just want to be on record that I'm vaccinated, that's fine. That's up to them. But in this approach is pretty hands off. What do you think about this approach, the honor system, Kim?
Well, so I would agree with you that I like to put a lot of faith in my fellow man, but as an HR professional over the last 18 months, where the Department of Labor and the IRS have really given individuals a lot of trust, and we've seen that being taken advantage of. I mean, and so I think in this particular case, I would say to employers, your employees, what your culture is. And so if the honor system works for you and you feel comfortable, great, good for you. Just recognize some of the risks associated with that.
Right. We do have a question that says, if they have a religious or medical exemption, do they still need to wear a mask since they haven't received the vaccine? I'm interpreting the guidance to say yes.
As am I. I would agree with that. And so, that would be considered an accommodation for those folks who cannot get the vaccine. So you could absolutely still require them to wear a mask as an accommodation.
Right. And so one way, if you have employees in that category and they say, well, I feel like I'm walking around with like the scarlet letter on my chest because everybody else gets to go mask free and I'm wearing a mask. And so that raises eyebrows. Did I object to it? Do I have a disability? Do I have a religious objection? One way to get around that is to just say, you know what, we're all going to wear masks regardless, because
Right.
we don't want people to have to stand out. Again, that's a cultural decision. The CDC and the states are not, well, not all, it goes state by state, but for the most part, they're leaving it up to employers. But if they're not vaccinated, they need to wear a mask. That's the guidance, and that's the dividing line.
And I think I saw a question either in the Q&A, maybe it was the chat, about discrimination. So basically, if you're going to require these folks to wear a mask, are you discriminating against them? And the answer is no, right? You are providing that accommodation for someone to be able to work, right? So, that you are not discriminating against those folks who are either unable to get a vaccine or for religious reasons.
Well, and that's a great point, and that was a question in the chat. What you can do, because people are people, and there could be some, there could be some human nature here involved. What you can do is educate your managers or the appropriate personnel around, or reiterate to them, like, we're in a phase of this pandemic where there might be some people with masks, some without. We are committed as a company to treating everybody equally. And if you see something, say something.
That's a great point. Really great point, Lesley.
So, I mean, that's just, it's business and it's health. And it's not, we're going to try and, to the best of our ability, strip out personal political preference, personal belief in science, personal non-belief in science, religious considerations. We're trying to strip all that out. We're all just trying to get through this thing together still.
Just remember that, yes, they can be required to wear a mask, but they shouldn't be treated differently in any other circumstance. So, that's again, you made a really good point as to educate your managers, just make sure that they're not making certain employment decisions because that person is wearing a mask.
Right. And if you're client facing, if you're a fitness center or food and bev or something like that, where you have customers coming in, it makes it even more complicated. Because you have customers might be wildly I mean, they're super excited that you have masks on, or
Mhm.
maybe they make fun of servers for wearing masks still. I'm just sort of throwing this out there. I've just heard this anecdotally, and you could try and nip that in the bud by posting in the physical location and also on social media what your current policy is, and just say, listen, we've decided to do XYZ thing. That's what you can expect when you come in to enjoy a meal. We want you to come in and enjoy a meal. But this is what we're doing for now. And again, it could all change in 4 months, 3 months.
Mhm.
But that's one way you can proactively communicate with your constituency. And then certainly with your employees, they should know what the policy is. Okay, I have a question here that says, my employer mentioned that they would not honor vaccine exemptions for medical or religious reasons and said it was legal because we are a private organization. Is this correct? I'm going to say no.
I would agree with that. I would speak with an attorney, but I don't believe that to be true. They still have to follow, federal and state guidelines, even though they're a private company.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not correct, Anonymous. So if that is truly what's happening and you have an HR department or somebody that you can talk to about that, that's something that needs to be looked at.
The only reason that I would think potentially, if there's a legitimate business reason, but again, remember the EEOC specifically says that you need to, as an employer, make accommodations for those who have a disability and cannot receive the vaccine, or for religious reasons. It's very clear under the EEOC. So again, Lesley gave you good advice. If you have an HR department there, I would reach out to them. If not, I'd reach out, just reach out to someone in management to say, hey, I don't think that this is correct under the law, and we should get some legal guidance.
Right. And that said, if this decision by management is motivated by sort of cynicism around people sort of hiding behind that medical or religious objection to the vaccine in order to not get it. We've done a couple webinars specifically on this topic. And we get that, like there are people who have bona fide medical and religious exemptions, and then there might be some people who just don't want to get the vaccine or don't believe in it or whatever, and we'll try and sort of slip on into those categories. We do have on our website on the COVID-19 page, there are some requests for exemption forms specifically for medical or religious reasons. The medical one to me is more straightforward because it engages a physician. The religious one is the one that's a little tougher to advise on because, and I forget the exact terminology, Kim, but the EEOC says, if you feel it's a bona fide
Request.
Right. Now, what does that mean in practice?
Right.
Gosh, I mean, that could be a potential pitfall if you're making just, judgments about whether or not somebody truly is a practicing shaker or whatever.
Right. So, the bar's lower, I believe, for religious exemptions. And so you're absolutely right. If you know for sure that person is a practicing whatever religion, that's fine. Can you ask for proof? Yes, I would be cautious of doing so. So that it is a little more gray, and so I here again, I'd probably get legal advice on that. You want to be consistent in the type of documentation that you're asking across employees who are asking for a religious exemption.
Right. So yeah, it can definitely go both ways. I mean, we've all heard, or maybe you've heard the theory about vaccine shedding and how vaccinated people, the vaccine can negatively affect fertility in women. That theory has been debunked. So I would say if, an attorney is always the best option if you're lucky enough to have one on hand or can find one. because you might get that. And I've heard that, I see these random reports of, an Airbnb that will not let anybody who's vaccinated rent it out, or a school in Miami that will terminate employees if they get vaccinated. So it's like, it's kind of a two-way street.
Right.
But the guidance from the federal government and the potential risk that you guys could have as employers is pretty clear on if you get a bona fide medical or religious exemption, you need to investigate that and use those forms. And again, the medical one is pretty straightforward. It's the religious one that you might have to do a little thinking about whether or not this is something that is worth really investigating, or just taking them at their word. All right. Let's see. I'm going to go to the next. Well, actually, real quickly, our friend Lisa has said that at her company, they've mandated vaccines for all staff, including actors, crew, and volunteers. Lisa, assuming that was a leadership decision, I hope that's going well. And you can, if you want to share your experience with us, if you want to type in some more details, that'd be great. But thanks for sharing that with us. All right. So we are going to do something really fun right now, guys. I haven't done this in months. We're going to do a poll. So I hope this works. Basically, I'm going to ask you what you see here is what seems right for your workplace, given what you have heard today, given what you guys have heard, heard anecdotally from other people, what the discussions have been internally. Let us know on this poll that hopefully I can launch successfully. All right. Okay, can you guys see that poll? Yeah, it looks like it. Give you guys some time here. We need some polling music.
I would offer to sing, but we want people to stay.
Yeah. We appreciate that level of self-awareness, Kim. All right. So it looks like people are still filling this out. It looks like active enforcement is the winner at this point, with 45% of respondents, followed by the honor system at 29%. Let me see if I can share this with you guys. We've got a couple people who say, you know what, I don't know, that's not why I'm here, which is also a valid response. We have just a handful of people who would opt for the incentivized enforcement, which again is sort of not requiring proof, but offering some fun prizes if they do show the card. So that is, thank you guys for sharing that. So it looks like the big winner is active enforcement, followed by the honor system. Oh, I can share the results. Look at that. Technology is amazing. All right, so there we have it. At least along this population of people, this sample population, this is where people, what the approach works best for their workplace, or they think might work best in the future. Only have one person who has said that they would require vaccinations. And that pretty much tracks with what I've been hearing. I'm interested to hear from you guys about how the active enforcement goes as in the coming weeks and months as you move through the summer and more people make decisions about the vaccine. All right. Yay. I wish I'd done more polls. I love polls. Okay. Some friendly reminders here is if you ask for proof, only ask for the bare minimum. So if you're going to go that route, even if it's incentivized enforcement, just ask for a card or a doctor's note. You don't need to know anything else. And you can, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but you can ask to verify that they've had the full round of shot.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And then also, I mean, really, they truly aren't considered vaccinated until till 2 weeks after their final shot. So that might be, I mean, to me, I would stick to that just because.
I would agree. That's, again, that's the data that we have.
Right.
So I would 100% agree with that.
And then, like we've said throughout this webinar, treat everyone equally. Do not discriminate in either direction. I mean, we've all been wearing masks now for 14 months. It shouldn't be a surprise to see somebody walking down the hall with a mask on. Support your employees. Don't make jokes about somebody who's, even if you know somebody's fully vaccinated and they still want to wear a mask, and don't joke that they're overly cautious or, just that's where we are right now. If you are a customer facing business, support your employees with your customers, make sure you have their back and enforce your policy. If you're going to make a policy, then stick with it. And you as leaders definitely need to stick with it. And then let people know that, as throughout this pandemic, you're going to continue to evaluate and move forward. Hopefully this is not a permanent thing, and things will change, but right now we have to use what we have, work together, and stay within the parameters of the federal and state and local guidance. Okay. So we do have some questions. And is there anything on the sort of reminder side, Kim, that I've forgotten to list here that we haven't covered?
No, I like the second bullet where you kind of again reinforce that discrimination. You want to make sure that again, your workplace is inclusive for those who may have chosen not to get a mask or I'm sorry, not to get a vaccine, or who can't for religious or health reasons. And this is where that harassment would come in if people are being made fun of or questioned or, just being harassed because of either their choice or their circumstance. So again, you want to make sure that you've got an inclusive environment. The other thing I would just add is I think these last 18 months have really reminded us of the importance of just being transparent with your employees. So again, if your policies are changing, you're going to want to make sure that you explain why, right? Why are we changing our policy now? What's different today than yesterday? And, let them know, continue to let them know everything that you're doing to keep the workplace safe.
Right. And, we all see the headlines and we all see the news, and I'm a lover and a disliker of news sometimes. And I say that with a couple communications degrees in my back pocket. The headlines can be, look at, for instance, 2 weeks ago when we had the pipeline hack here on the East Coast, the headline in our local paper, and no offense to my friends at the local paper, was, quote, "Everyone is panicking, gas shortage." And then everybody did panic and there was a gas shortage. And so the vaccine headlines can be also as sort of, not what's the right word, I almost said trigger happy, but that's not what I want to say. They're trying to get clicks and views. And if your employees are going on sort of what they're seeing in that respect only, you just need to assure them that you're attending webinars, you're doing research, you're consulting professionals, and this is what we're going with, and this is why. So again, no offense to my friends in the news industry, but that is also a business, and they need clicks. All right, Lisa, my friend at Virginia Rep, says we've had no pushback from our 100% vaccination policy. We circulated our policy document along with the medical and religious exemption request forms. As of June 9th, we will have all full-time staff 100% vaccinated and mask restrictions lifted. Our staff was largely either fully furloughed or partially furloughed until March 11th, 2021. Gosh, it's a long time. Mm-hmm. We are beyond thrilled to be reopening our theater in July. We also included a zero tolerance of harassment policy for anyone who still wanted to mask. So that's the approach that Lisa took. She is a part of the staff at a Virginia Repertory Theater here in Richmond. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. That's great.
And great work by you all. That's outstanding.
So one question I have is for businesses like Lisa's, when they're trying to get people back in the door, patrons back in the door, are you posting that you're 100% fully vaccinated on somewhere? That's one approach you could do if you think that your patrons would enjoy that information. All right, what else do we have here? Okay, Bill has been very patient this whole time. Bill asks, what is the best way for employers to determine who is vaccinated? So just to reiterate, Bill, you are allowed to ask, stick to yes or no questions. If you're going to do that sort of active enforcement, then I would ask everybody, not just some people. If you're going to do the honor system, then what you're saying is that we're not going to ask, we're going to trust that if you're not wearing a mask, that you are fully vaccinated and that you care about the health and wellness of your fellow employees. Bill also says Virginia issued permanent regulations in January mandating actions to be followed by employers. Does Virginia's dropping of mandated requirements supersede the permanent regulations through Virginia OSHA? Bill, that's a really great question. Those of you in Virginia might remember that there was a temporary standard and now it's become permanent around what employers' responsibilities are when there is a pandemic afoot. How does that change by the mask mandate? It's my understanding, Bill, and I honestly, admittedly need to look into this further, that that mandate it goes into effect if the guidance from the federal government and the state government indicates that we are still at risk for where we were last year. That doesn't make any sense. Let me try and rephrase that. It's my understanding that the standard is if
There's a state of emergency.
Yeah, sorry, I can't find the words today.
That's all right.
Thank you. If it's a state of emergency, then it goes into effect, but I will do more research on that and communicate that out. Because I didn't see, I'll go back and read the executive action from Northam and see if it references that. So I'll have to get back to you on that, Bill, but that's a great question for those of us in Virginia. All right, so Colleen says, I work in a small healthcare facility. I understand that the mask requirement is still in effect in patient treatment areas. My question is, should we allow staff to relax the masks in non-patient treatment areas such as break rooms if they have been vaccinated? Also, could specifying that only vaccinated staff can ditch the masks potentially cause a discrimination situation? Example, if a break room is small and vaccinated people are in there, could this be seen as punitive to unvaccinated employees if they are somewhat prohibited from use of this area? Kim, what do you think about that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that would be discriminatory. There is a reason, that they might not be able to access that. They might, because they are unvaccinated, they might have some more restrictions. But again, I don't see that as discriminatory as long as there's a break room where they can go.
Right, exactly. I mean, it does feel a little twitchy to me to do that because it's, it's just uncharted waters for us.
Right, it is. The way that I look at it is that you're not terminating them, right? You're not terminating them. You are requiring an accommodation to keep the workplace safe. As long as you are not, let's say, they can't participate, they would be, they wouldn't get a raise because they haven't been vaccinated. That's where discrimination would come into play, right? It's not for things such as protection.
Right. So access is not necessarily a discriminatory.
Not necessarily. Yeah.
Okay.
My view. That's my opinion. But yes, I feel pretty confident in that.
Okay. All right. And David says, we have an employee that maintains a locked office as a form of COVID protection. Can the company insist the office remain unlocked Shared files are located in this person's office that are used by other employees. I believe the employee has been vaccinated, but that would need to be verified. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that you can require them to unlock the office, yes. And if doing so would require that that person wear a mask because of the traffic in and out of the office, then yes, if they haven't been vaccinated. But you can require that person to unlock that office.
So that begs a follow-up question, Kim. What if I have my own office and my employer as a whole adopts a, policy where vaccinated people can go unmasked? Can I choose to put a little sign on my door that says masks are required no matter what?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that's more up to the employer
Okay.
versus the individual.
Okay.
I would think it would be more appropriate for the company to have a policy regarding that rather than an individual say, this is what I'm requiring before you enter my office.
Okay. All right, and follow up to our discussion just now about the break room situation. Angela says, why wouldn't they be able to use the break room just with their masks on? I don't think having two separate break rooms is the answer.
Well, I would agree with you. I think they should be able to use the break room if they have their mask on. And, they would want to maintain social distance if they can. But yeah, they should be able to use that room.
I guess what the original question was getting at is that it's a small space.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some discomfort among vaccinated folks who, I don't know the specific situation. I don't know the specific
Right.
makeup of who's vaccinated.
That's right. And I think I would agree with you. I think that the issue was that it was a small space. And if, there's a lot of folks in there that are vaccinated and maybe there isn't enough room for that person to come in and socially distance, then, they would either have to come back later or find another room. Could they go, so that would be a potential issue, but they could absolutely come in, if there's enough room. Absolutely.
I guess that would apply also to any sort of meeting space. If you have a meeting that's consisting, the attendees are a mixed bag of vaccinated versus unvaccinated. You could say as a company policy, all right, for now, everyone wears a mask to these meetings because the room is small and unventilated, and we're just going to sort of equalize the playing field, level the playing field.
Right.
Or
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, or you could have mask versus, unvaccinated people wear masks and then sit a little farther apart. It just depends, I think, literally on
the size.
The
another thing that they could actually do is some of those folks who aren't vaccinated, maybe they do a Zoom call in, even though they might be down the hall.
Right.
So, here again, just like when we entered into the COVID situation, when we were figuring it out, this is going to be the same situation when you have two groups of employees, vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Right. I think too, it's important to institute a culture of, guys, this is just this is the reality right now in our world. Nobody ever could anticipate this. Let's not make either vaccinated or unvaccinated people pariahs or any sort of, it's just a thing. It's between us and them, management and them, and their personal situation. It's not, it's just where we are as a society right now.
Right. Exactly. We're still all one company. And, this too would be a good idea to get some insight from your employees. What works best for them?
Right. Exactly. All right. Mary Lou says we only have about 35 employees, and we know most employees are vaccinated because we arrange for them to fairly early on through the local health department. However, we have a handful of people who are resistant for one reason or another. So the unvaccinated are also those that haven't been very compliant about wearing a mask, and their work is often done out in the field doing repairs and maintenance. So enforcement is difficult. On top of that, they know how hard of a time we are having hiring people. So the small request results in comments to their supervisor that they'll just quit. Let them is an easy answer, but I understand how the supervisor is in a tight spot to have to give in to them. Obviously, there are other issues here, but that's another topic. So now we're faced with possibly having to incentivize them for vaccinations for just a few, and we're debating if it's worth it, given we'd have to apply it across the board. Open to any solutions beyond just calling their bluff. Ooh,
Wow,
this is a
that's,
good one.
yeah, that is a good one. And it's a tough one, unfortunately. You know, I think the organization needs to kind of weigh, you know, the risks of losing these employees, because if you have somebody out there that isn't being compliant and isn't vaccinated and is working directly with a client, you know, what are the risks if for some reason they could potentially expose someone? So I think, you know, an approach, and you would need to figure out what works best, but to incentivize, you know, these, recognizing that you would need to treat everybody the same, but, you know, some sort of incentive to get these folks to comply. It sounds like you have educated them, but, you know, ultimately, if they're not going to be compliant and they're not going to get the vaccine, and they're not compliant with wearing their masks and whatnot, and potentially putting clients at risk, you know, you could discipline up to and including termination. And I know you don't want to lose those folks, but again, it's kind of, you need to understand how risk tolerant you are when it
Yeah, I
comes
mean,
to that.
that labor market situation, I would like to do a whole
Yeah,
separate webinar on that.
yes, yes.
Yeah, we definitely are hearing that a lot. People are over a barrel about this situation, and it tends to be in fields like yours, Mary Lou, like the skilled trades and things like that, where it's just so hard to replace these folks. And so, you know, terminating them for this seems like it might be more trouble than it's worth. But like Kim said, I mean, you have a policy, and yes, there's a delicate balance of power here, but at the same time, if
you're not going to enforce the policy, then, you know, why have the policy? I can absolutely appreciate the position that you're in, though. You know, the danger would be that if you don't enforce the policy with those folks, and you would enforce it maybe with a new hire, for example, you know, you could really get into a sticky situation there. So, yeah.
Just maybe you can just give them, I don't mean to say just, maybe you can give them, just be like, listen, guys, we're trying to comply with OSHA here. So, you know, we also want, you know, we need to keep this business running. So here's $100 gift card. Here's 2 hours, just go get vaccinated. And, you know, if somebody has, if they truly want to go down the bona fide exemption objection route, then they can do that. Here are the forms. We'll treat each case, we'll assess each case as they come in. But, you know, you're just trying to abide by the rules. And, you know, on the flip side of that, you could have one of your vaccinated employees call your bluff and say, hey, wait a minute, how come these people aren't wearing masks? Now, I know they're out in the field, maybe by themselves a lot, so they might not ever see the evidence. You could have clients who are like, why are these technicians not wearing masks? What's your vaccination policy? I'm not sure if that would be something that would come up, but yeah, I know there's not an easy answer, Mary Lou, but it's, I would give it a shot. Ha, no pun intended. All right. Lisa, our friend back at the theater, says she'll be emailing all patrons prior to their attendance about their vaccination policy. It's likely due to the actors union that patrons will have to be masked. Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Okay. So that's another thing. That's another factor to consider. If one of your members of your partnerships or networks or the people who represent your employees have their own rules, then you'll have to consider how that impacts your business. Okay. Jerry says, while you can set up a policy procedure within your workforce, how do you handle this with visitors to your office? Great question.
Right. And that's really up to the employer. As an employer, again, you can require that your visitors wear masks, right? And whether they are vaccinated or not. I actually just was traveling this past week and went through several different states. And there were some businesses that said, hey, if you're vaccinated, again, trusting me, you don't have to wear a mask. If you other businesses required a mask regardless. So that's up to you how you want to handle that.
And it's also, oh, go ahead.
And I think Lesley had said earlier as well that you can post a sign like, hey, we are requiring all of our employees wear masks, even though they may have been vaccinated. You can share that with your visitors, your approach with your visitors as well.
And that sort of dovetails with the question about, can we, if we're in, can we relax the mask rules when people are not out on the sales floor, or not in the front of the house of the restaurant, or not in a patient facing area? If you're back in the kitchen with a bunch of other vaccinated folks, can you relax the mask rules? And we just don't have guidance on that. We're sort of hoping that OSHA will chime in. But it really is up to, at least the way I see it, it's up to the workplace and like how well you can enforce that, you know?
100%.
Okay, and so Colleen says, by making policies geared to vaccinated versus unvaccinated employees, does this have the potential to out the unvaccinated employee, i.e. compromise employee protected health information or private health information?
Yeah, so no, as long as you are only asking, did you get the vaccine? Yes or no, right? And Lesley said this earlier, if you start asking why, then absolutely you could get in trouble. That's why you just want to ask yes or no.
Now, the concept of, quote, outing the unvaccinated employee is interesting to me, because that's really what a lot of people, to me, that's the crux of this weird phase that we're in right now. Isn't that? Before, everybody had to wear a mask regardless. So it was difficult to spot people who either agree with the vaccine or don't agree with it, or whatever. It was a level playing field. Now it makes some people feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable because they've chosen to not get vaccinated.
It's really reacclimating ourselves, because if you stop and think about it, even last year at this time, if we were all being compliant and wearing masks, and let's face it, we saw people out and about who weren't wearing masks, and you did have a tendency, well, I know I did, it's like, wow, you're risking everybody's health by acting like that. So now it's kind of the same thing, right? That whether or not you get a vaccine is a personal choice. It's a personal choice. And employers can ask, have you been vaccinated? Yes or no. That's all. And so I'm not disagreeing with you, Lesley. It is like, oh, you decided not to get a vaccine. You look at someone different, or even somebody who's without a vaccine, or I'm sorry, without a mask, who's been vaccinated, there's still that, oh my gosh, should I approach that person? It's just a mindset for right now. And I think we just need to keep moving forward. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we need as a society to reframe it as not outing somebody.
Yes, right.
And I know that seems a little Pollyanna, and it just really depends on people's reasons for whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. I mean, because it goes both ways. You can have unvaccinated people judge people who are vaccinated.
Yes, right.
It just, we're all humans and we're not perfect. And I have my own personal, beliefs. I'm not perfect either. When I see people who aren't, like, certainly last year when people weren't wearing, like, defying the mask mandate.
Yep.
But now it's a little murkier. So if you can somehow get it across to your team and sort of infuse the culture with hey guys, this is where we are right now. Let's
Mhm,
all be happy that we have jobs and our business is still open,
mhm.
and let's work together on this. And it's just a piece of cloth. And, you know, you might have some people who might be like, oh, you know what? This is a pain to wear this every day. Look how free these other people are. I'm just going to get vaccinated. I was on the fence before. I'm just going to do it.
Mhm.
And I personally think that's why some governors that will remain nameless went ahead and lifted the mask mandate. To me, the message was very clear. No
Right.
mask or no vaccine mask, vaccine mask. And I think that they were trying to incentivize people who are on the fence. Regardless of your opinion on that, whether or not I'm right or wrong, that is one approach that you could. But that said, you don't want to make it uncomfortable for anybody, regardless
Mhm,
of where they come down on this vaccine issue. Unless you make it a condition of employment, and then you have every right
mhm.
um, to quote out them, because that's policy. All right, I know we're coming up. Oh my gosh, we're over time. I'm so sorry, Kim. I didn't realize I was having
That's
so
all
much
right.
fun. I didn't realize it was 12:08. All right, I think we answered. We definitely hit the Q&A. We've got a couple in the chat. What rights do employees who refuse the vaccine have? Can they hold their employer responsible if they have health issues after taking an employer-required vaccine? So if you require the vaccine, yes, you could. That could be a workers' comp claim. Now, whether or not people will litigate, I don't know, but certainly if they have side effects or health issues and you required the vaccine, the workers' comp conversation might be forthcoming. Anything else to add to that one, Kim?
No, I think you're good.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I think we've got everything else. Thank you so much, everybody, for
Great
chiming in.
questions.
Great questions. Oh, Mary Lou says she's wondering if anyone here who has a policy and forms in place would be willing to share them. So Mary Lou, we have on our Dominion payroll.com on the COVID page, we do have the some sample policies and some sample or some forms for request for exemptions. But I do encourage if anybody has a policy that they've written, because there really is, as you can tell from this webinar, there's some discretionary decisions that you will have to make as a workplace. So no two policies are going to be alike, probably. If you want to share some with me, send them to questions at. I would be really interested in seeing some of those if you're comfortable with that. And we can, of course, on the next time we do one of these, we can share what we've heard, because you know in 2 weeks who knows what's going to be
That's right.
changing out there. So, thank you so much, everybody. We are again so grateful for you. We hope you have a great day. Kim, I
Oh,
just enjoy chatting with you and hearing your perspective. We really
well,
appreciate
thanks
it.
so much for having me, and have a great upcoming holiday weekend, everybody.
Yes, for sure. Stay safe out there, wear sunscreen, and try to follow your state's guidelines.
All right. Have a
All
good one.
right.
Thanks, Lesley.
Bye, guys. Take care.